Hello. Hello, my name is Darren Dickerhoof. I'm a principal at Dickerhoof Properties. We buy and remodel shopping centers around Oregon. Before I get into my speech here, so I don't forget at the end, I want to welcome or wish McGuire Dickerhoof a happy 8th birthday. McGuire's here, and his brother just turned 11, so they're excited to get out of school for an hour. And they're also excited to try and figure out what I do, because according to them, I just drive around in my truck and talk on my phone all day long. But so yeah, we're basically based here in Corvallis. We work all over the state. Whoops, going the wrong way here. 1 second here. A couple of quick projects that we've done. This is up in the Dalles, Oregon. We bought an Ernst home store. For those of you who remember Ernst, they were around 10, 12 years ago, went under after Home Depot really exploded. This particular one we bought, the prior owner had put Staples in it, and then we came in and kind of finished the project off. We tore down the greenhouse, built Big 5 sporting goods. Another project, we've done a lot of work in Klamath Falls, Oregon. We've actually done more work as far as square footage in Klamath Falls than we've done in Corvallis. This was a small mall that we bought. On the left-hand side here is a Ross Dress for Less, and then Safeway's on the far side, but that before photo is what the mall looked like. As you can tell, it's not exactly architecturally interesting. We came in, one of the big things that you'll see on our projects is we try and give our tenants their own identity. So on this one, you'll see we did a Petco on the far end, Famous Footwear. This photo is about 1.5 years old. We've actually just made some changes to this. The Hallmark and the Borders Express have just been converted into a Sports Authority, very similar to the one that we did here in Corvallis. And that Office Depot has actually just recently, well, about 1 year ago, been converted into a JoAnn fabric. Everybody here is probably familiar with this project. This is probably our pinnacle project to date. And I'm going to talk about this project in detail here in a few minutes. These are the markets that we currently have properties in around Oregon. We have about 1 million square foot of retail that we've accumulated in the last 10 to 12 years. We also have properties in Gardnerville, Nevada, Rexburg, Idaho, and this past year we've been doing a lot of work in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, for a high-end grocery store, an organic grocer over there. Our projects for this year, right now we're doing the new Ross Dress for Less on the south end of Bend, right next door to the outlet center in Bend, Oregon. In a month or so, we're going to start a project in Pendleton, Oregon, remodeling a shopping center that has Rite Aid and some other, there's a bowling alley that's going to be closing. We're going to be putting in a grocery outlet. And then later this spring, going into summer, about 10 days ago, we bought a shopping center in Bandon that has Ray's grocery store. There's a local pharmacy that's selling to Rite Aid that's going to open, and some other tenants that we're going to bring to that shopping center. Basically, a quick history on our family business. My parents got kicked out of their apartment in downtown San Francisco on July 1st, 1970, and bought their first home in Oakland, California, and I was born the next day. The following year, my dad was fixing up the house while he worked for Train Heating and Air Conditioning as a salesman, and they sold the house at the end of the year and made more money working on the house than he made at his job. So he quit his job and started doing construction. So we basically grew up on construction sites. So these are the type of photos that an OSHA inspector would live to get their hands on. But that top photo is I'm on the bicycle. That's probably about 1997. That's a house in Piedmont, California. My brother's on his tricycle. If you look closely up into the studs behind there, my dad's actually standing there watching us. This, when I was 7 and my brother was 5, my parents moved to Carmel, California, where my dad built houses for about 20 years. So this photo right here was shot probably around 86, 87. My sister is walking the floor joist there. You can see my brother's just waiting for her to step on the insulation and fall through the floor. And that's me with the earmuffs on, nailing off the floor. But We learned very hands-on. My dad did everything himself. That's him working on the footings for a house in Carmel. That's me shoveling dirt. This house above, I got to basically work on the designs with a family. There were actually 4 families that owned this house that was being framed up top. And I helped them design it and then built it. What you don't know is in that picture, I'm kind of posing like I'm holding the wall up with one finger. Just before that, before we put the braces on, we were posing and we actually dropped the wall and it fell backwards onto that rock pile and broke. But my dad's specialty, the last 5 or 6 years he was there, were those kind of Carmel charmer old world cottages that you see if you go to Carmel. This was one that he built around 1992. But essentially, I came up here in 1988 as a freshman at OSU, and I lived in Cawthorn Hall just down the road here. But because I had grown up basically learning on the job with my dad, sitting in a classroom trying to learn from books was never really a big thing for me. So after about a month, I was calling my parents asking if I could come home. And my dad wouldn't let me come home. My mom had the bright idea of, hey, why don't you go out and buy a little house or something to work on while you're going to school? So I basically I think I tore a map out of the phone book. I didn't have a car. I started riding my bike through neighborhoods of Corvallis and basically fanning out. Now, 1988 was an election year, so I'd be riding my bike along, I'd see a sign off in the distance, I'd ride a couple of blocks, and I'd be, damn that Michael Dukakis. Has anybody seen that ad with the, how could anybody vote for that guy? He's driving an army tank with a stormtrooper helmet on. But eventually I came across this little house on the corner of 6th and Jefferson, right across from the Gazette-Times building. Rode up on my bike, 18 years old. I weighed about 30 or 40 pounds less than I do now. So tall, skinny kid. The owner was out front, and a man named Harry Olson. And apparently I didn't impress him because he wouldn't even show me the inside of the building. So I went home, called my dad. He said, ride your bike back down there and get the name of the real estate agent. So he called her. Her name was Sally Rondeau. And I ended up buying this house for $38,000. For those of you who were here in the 80s, the economy was just coming out of a pretty bad recession, so everybody was offering seller financing. So I bought this house with $3,000 down, and my mortgage payment was $295 a month. I got 4 roommates that I knew from my dorm, and they were paying me $200 each. But so I was getting $800, and I was living here. And this house is actually for sale right now for $335. But from there, my dad then started to buy some houses. This is a little house that now probably needs to be fixed up again, but this is immediately next door on 6th Street by the Gazette-Times building. And from there, we kind of grew into apartments. And through the 90s, we bought and remodeled about 250 units of college rentals. This particular one is located behind Rice's Pharmacy. But by the late 90s, we were kind of getting burned out on the repetitiveness of the apartments, and it just was losing its fun. So we were looking for something new to do. And we had driven, these aren't the best pictures, but this is University Plaza, which is across the street here. For those of you who've been in Corvallis for a long time, this is where CH2M Hill started. So in the 40s, they started in a farmhouse on this end of the building, and over about a 30-year period of time, they expanded, I think, in 7 additions. We picked this property up, I think, in '99 for $1.1 million with $100,000 down. It was 55,000 square foot. So if you do the math on that, it was pretty cheap. The problem was it was in such bad shape, it probably should have been torn down, but we were crazy enough to start working on it. And we invested about $2 million renovating it. And we were able to fill the whole building within about 18 months. After that project, we did a few other little projects around town, and one day I was reading the Wall Street Journal. I came across an ad for a retail center for sale in Corvallis, Oregon, called the guy, and it turned out to be where Grocery Outlet used to be on 9th Street, and now it's just recently become Natural Grocers. We ended up buying that little center. remodeling it, and we really liked retail and decided at that point that retail was going to be our focus. So once we were done with that project, we started looking at retail properties. We always thought this was one of the best centers in town as far as location and whatnot. So I then wrote a letter to Robert C. Wilson, who was the owner. For those of you who have been in Corvallis for a long time, he was a big contractor here in the 50s, 60s, 70s. He built the hospital, built the library, built a lot of the schools, a lot of the churches. He had a reputation for being a fairly tough guy to work with. Wrote him a letter probably around 2002 maybe, just 3 or 4 sentences, said, "My name is Darren Dickerhoof. We remodel properties. We liked your property, and I'd like to talk to you." And so then I waited by the phone, and he never called. So after a couple of letters, he finally called us, and I met with him, and we talked for a while. During that first meeting, about halfway through, he kind of leaned forward, dropped his glasses down on his nose, gave me the laser beam eye look, and said, "You're awfully young. Are you really serious about this?" And so I threw up, it kind of caught me off guard, and I said, "Yeah, geez, Mr. Wilson, we're definitely interested in your property. I'm not here to waste your time, and I'm not here to waste my time. So what do you want to do?" So he basically said he was thinking about selling it. He had a few other properties he wanted to sell, but that he was prepared to sell this in a few years. So over time, we got to know him. We actually went into contract with him to buy this around 2004, but the contract fell apart because we had disagreements over the condition of the roofing and HVAC and stuff like that. He then wanted to look into some of the issues, and the plan all along was to buy it from him a little bit later, but then unfortunately he passed away in the summer of '06. We continued to be interested in this property, so we contacted his office and let him know that we were still out there looking to want to do something here. And one of his daughters contacted us, and we worked with her and the estate, and we bought the shopping center in 2 pieces, two parts over 2 years to help them from a tax standpoint. So at that point, we owned the property. We bought the front part, the Rite Aid, at what was the equivalent of a 4% return. So in the real estate world, that's a terrible return. Most people want anywhere from a 6 to a 10% return based on the quality of the property or whatnot. The reason that we were willing to do that was the rent was really low, but Rite Aid had lease term till 2018. So we were gambling that we'd be able to convince Rite Aid that they should move out of the building and let us redevelop it. So in late 2007, going into '08, we started working on development plans. So the Rite Aid as it was is what retailers look for. They want a big store, a big storefront, a sea of asphalt. If you're familiar with the city of Corvallis and you review their planning guidelines, I'm pretty sure they want a field full of bicycles. So basically we began the process of preparing to go into planning for our project. And so, everybody thinks they've got the greatest project ever, so you get all pumped up to go, and this is kind of what it feels like as you're getting ready to take your project in front of a bunch of people at the city for them to critique it. Now what you're looking at here is the before site plan on top, the after on the bottom, but this after is the evolution of probably close to a year of meetings. Early on, this was one of the first projects that would fall under the neighborhood retail zoning. And early on, it was clear that even the city didn't quite know what their guidelines were, because we'd go into a meeting, they'd tell us they wanted the front door to Rite Aid on Circle. We'd have to argue with Rite Aid that we'd need to do that, and then we'd come to a meeting later and realize that no, we could face it to the south if we called it a shopping street and whatnot. So after a couple meetings like that, we realized we were in way over our heads, so we hired Dave Dotson, who spoke first this morning. Before he worked for OSU, he had a private company called Willamette Valley Planning. We brought him in to help us, and then we also brought Lyle Hutchins from Devco. I think Lyle probably knows the city guidelines better than the people at the city. And the two of them worked with us over a period of about a year to get the whole project approved. And so even though we tried to make it fun for them, they still felt they should charge us. But after about a year and $150,000, we had a project that we think was ready to go. But after all that, you kind of feel like this when you come out of those meetings at the Planning Commission. And I don't know, if you feel like that, you might want to think about retirement. But one of the things that the developers are often sandwiched in between is you have the city telling you what they want, you have the retailers telling you what they want, and the national retailers aren't very flexible. They don't really, if they're doing 50, 100 stores a year, some of the big ones, 200 stores a year, they don't really care what the city is telling you. So what we have here is on top is a prototype Rite Aid, and on the bottom is our Rite Aid. You can see we did a lot of design features on the sides to make ours look more attractive. This is one of the only Rite Aids in the country with the outdoor sales area in the front. But basically fine-tuned the building, and partially because of the city's input, but also because we did feel the upper one was kind of plain on the sides, and this was definitely a better looking building. This is a great photo that was shot during construction. The Rite Aid is done, and we've got parking around it so people can access it, and we've begun construction on the market of choice. One critical thing on this project was our timing was absolutely terrible as far as the economy. We basically, we purchased it with short-term loans from Umpqua Bank, and in late '08, we were getting ready to break ground on the Rite Aid. So we called up Umpqua Bank, told them we were ready to go. We just needed like $6 or $7 million, and we wanted to get rolling. And if any of you remember, late '08, the economy was in a clear free fall, and banks were changing how they do business altogether. And apparently, hey, it's us, didn't work on getting that loan. So after several months of talking to them, and what we finally convinced them on, which we felt was logical, was, hey, Rite Aid stock's in the toilet. Their stock was trading at like 25, 28 cents a share, which was almost ridiculous. We basically said, look, we can do nothing. We can leave Rite Aid there, and you've got Rite Aid in 100%, or we can build this building, move them out front. If they go under for some crazy reason and they don't keep this store, it's a great Walgreens. Walgreens would probably die to have this location. And then on top of that, the market of choice at that point had come into play, and Umpqua thought market of choice was a fabulous choice for a grocery store. We had talked to multiple grocers. We talked to Jack Ritchie about expanding, but he didn't want as big a store. The co-op had talked to us. They didn't want as big a store. And Rite Aid loved market of choice. They're actually the ones that brought market of choice to the project, partially because market of choice does not have a pharmacy. But basically, we finally got the financing. My brother and I gave up on waiting for Umpqua, and we actually started on the Rite Aid, and we were about $500,000 to $600,000 into the project before our loan funded, so which was a little bit stressful. That was in the spring of '09. We worked, Market of Choice wanted this to look like their flagship store on 29th and Willamette, so we worked with their architects, TBG in Eugene, a gentleman named Ben Rippey, and then locally, Sean Stoneberg from Stability Engineering does all of our structural work. Basically, the two of them worked with us on getting the plans. We were responsible for the facade, all the site work, and everything else. And then Market of Choice made the investment on the interior. That interior is about a $6 million interior. Now, a lot of it's stuff that you don't see. There's over $1 million in electrical work, and probably well over $1 million in electrical and, mechanical and refrigeration equipment. The shops on the north side, my dad loved doing design work. So basically, we were trying to give each tenant their own identity, like I was saying. we drove up to the Bridgeport Lifestyle Center at the Lake Oswego exit of I-5, and we walked around there and shot a lot of photos, and then came back, and my dad basically drew up this facade. We pulled some architectural features off of the market of choice to tie it in with so that they'd kind of flow together somewhat. As you come around back, the JoAnn's, again, we get the prototype facade. This is kind of a standard JoAnn's look, but typically it doesn't have an overhang like that. So we took their prototype facade and basically combined 4 shops and did this JoAnn's. Here, the Ritchie's was tough because the roof height was not very good. On the ends, it was as low as 10 foot. And typically, your retailers want a good 10 to 12 foot, and then you need a couple more foot for all your HVAC and all your other gear. So we had 2 or 3 tenants, mostly home goods people. 2 different national home goods tenants were working with us. We couldn't get it to work out, and both of them ended up not coming to Corvallis just as they got more into it. They didn't think the sales projections were good enough. Eventually, Sports Authority came to us and wanted to do this, and at the same time, we were actually discussing pretty seriously with Best Buy to do a new test small store format for Corvallis. They got absolutely hammered by the sales the last few years over the internet, so they backed out. We went ahead and did the Sports Authority. The other portion is all prepped, so Sports Authority is only in half of the Ritchie's. We actually have a letter of intent with a national tenant that'll probably be moving into this center later this year or early next year. One great thing from working on this shopping center is that we got to work with a lot of good tenants. So this was our first Rite Aid. We're going to be remodeling the one in Pendleton. We're going to be doing one in Bandon. Market of Choice, we got to do this one. They're involved in this project that we're doing in Jackson Hole. We're also talking to them about some stuff in Central Oregon. JoAnn's, this was our first JoAnn's just a few years ago. We've now done 4 stores for them. Sports Authority, this was our first store for them. We just did the second small format store for them. It's important to have fun on the job site. This is my dad and my brother and I. This picture was shot by the Gazette-Times shortly after the Market of Choice opened. You can see the JoAnn's in the background. I think at this point the photographer asked us what it was like working with the city, and we just said, "Smile and wave, boys, smile and wave." The retail in general for Corvallis, the 9th Street, I think, will continue to be the key area. One of the problems with retailers is they're kind of like high school girls, and I did not understand high school girls in high school, and I still don't understand them, but they're scared to death to be different or do anything that their competitors or their friends are doing. So the retailers all want to cluster where there's new activity. So now that we've done the Market of Choice and Regency has come in and they've done this center here where Nandell's used to be, and now you've got the Walmart and this other stuff there, a lot of the retailers want to be clustered on 9th Street. There's really not that many big locations left for them. Some of the interesting things that'll probably happen in the not too distant future, where are we? Over here is Albertsons. I called Gary Pond last week to ask him what's going on at Albertsons. He said he had a tenant they were working with, but he couldn't talk to me about it, so apparently I need to take him out for a martini. But up here, so it sounds like we'll have somebody in that box in the not too distant future. I think the Winco will always be a big draw in Corvallis and for Timber Hill Shopping Center. That's considered more of a neighborhood shopping center up there because it's more in a neighborhood area than on a main artery, even though Walnut and Kings are key arteries. But most of your retailers, when you talk to them, they really talk about 9th Street. To me, on the north end, where you'll probably see activity in the not too distant future is, eventually something that will probably happen to the Kmart. Kmart in general is just basically being on a lifeline. I think it's just a matter of time until you see all the Kmarts shut down. You've got the new Wilco under construction right now that's going in right there. Eventually Staples will likely downsize out of that building. And they'll either stay there and probably cut in half the size or relocate. We did at one point talk to them about moving over to our center, but they weren't quite ready. At the new center with Walmart, apparently our local anti-growth people were sleeping when the Walmart slipped in on us like that. But I think, the Office Max will be moving across the parking lot in about half the size. So you'll see some other, and there's some other boxes being built right there. So there's definitely some room for some activity in there. As a developer, it's all about location, and I really question long-term if that's a smart, or if that's really a well laid out center. It's great for Buffalo Wild Wings up here on the front, but you have no exposure back there. So to spend millions of dollars to put a store back here and to put a kid in a chicken suit at minimum wage with a sign to try and get your customers back here, I'm not convinced that's really a great way to invest your money. South Corvallis to me is interesting. Clearly, and downtown. Clearly, Corvallis has really stabilized their downtown. When I first started doing stuff in the late 80s, now that you have a problem finding a parking space, if you went down there in the late 80s at 7 o'clock at night, you'd have a hard time finding a car. It was pretty bad. But the riverfront, I'm sure, will continue to be good. Down here in South Corvallis, you've got, the zoning is kind of screwy along South Corvallis. They've come up, the city's come up with a zoning that's more of a metro area where they're trying to do these little clusters of retail on the corners, and they've got, the lots are not big enough to really do that. The one area that has potential down there is the auction yard. That's the one big piece of dirt. To me, it seems like that's the place that the Walmart grocery store should have gone, but again, they have make their own decisions. Up here, the most exciting thing long term over the next 20 years, in my opinion, will be what happens to the Ebonite site. I mean, that's an awesome piece of property. It's on the river. It's close enough to downtown that you could put a pedestrian bridge here. That could become kind of like our old mill district, like Bend has, and really transform the downtown and make it something different. But at the end of the day, so for any of you young developers or people getting ready to get into it, real estate's a fantastic business to be in. I was 18 years old. I bought a 1,900 square foot house for $38,000. You've got to just decide what you want to do and stick with it. 25 years later, we have about 1 million square foot of retail all over the state. And for us, it's just an exciting thing to do. Our dad used to say, figure out what you want to do for fun. He said, if you want to sell toothpicks and you're the best toothpick salesperson in the world, you're going to be successful. For us, we love buying and fixing up old centers. To me, it's kind of the ultimate form of recycling. And so it's just a joy to get up every day and to be able to work on projects like this. Thank you.